Hello everybody, SlimKirby here, and I'm going on a long journey of trying to complete every single Game Boy Advance game in North America. This is the story of the highs, the lows, and all the silly stuff in between for the Game Boy Advance completion experience. This is GB Ace. Game number 16, Advance Wars. Aw yeah, let's go. It's Advance Wars time. And I think it's no surprise that I'm really excited about this one. Because if you know me, you know that I love me some Advance Wars. Not only have I covered 3 of the games here on my YouTube channel as Let's Plays, but my original Advance Wars Let's Play was probably one of the first on the YouTube platform. Or at least that's what I remember at the time when I first started recording it. So this series has a lot of significance for me when it comes to my content, and I was happy to draw it here for GB Ace as well, especially this early on. This game was released on September 10th, 2001 in North America, a very unfortunate date considering what would happen the very next day. Yeah, this series hasn't had the best of luck with international events, especially considering the theme of this game is war and everything. Wasn't much better considering the remake on Switch was understandably delayed as well due to the conflict going on in Ukraine. Anyway, this was developed by Intelligent Systems and published by Nintendo. Actually the first Nintendo published game that was drawn for this series, considering Super Mario Advance was forced as the first game. Now, this series didn't quite get its beginnings here on the Game Boy Advance. Much like Fire Emblem, this is a long-standing series going back to the Famicom days, and had various installments released across the Famicom, Game Boy, and Super Famicom. But, of course, these games were only released in Japan, so this would be our first exposure to this series. I've personally never played those older games, and don't know too much about them as a result. I do know one of the characters in the second game was a character back then though, but that's really as far as my knowledge goes. I'm a little more in the know with Fire Emblem, if you couldn't tell. Let's get to the story of this game, shall we? This game takes place in the universe known as War's World, with this particular game focusing on the territory of Cosmoland. This land is occupied by 4 different countries: Orange Star, Blue Moon, Yellow Comet, and Green Earth. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Olaf, the leader of Blue Moon, decides to invade the Orange Star Nation for seemingly no reason. The country of Orange Star is now fighting for their lives to end this conflict and drive the invaders out of their lands. There is a reason for this invasion, but of course we won't learn that until much later in the game. Until then though, it's up to Nell, a very intelligent and charismatic leader who seems to be in charge of the Orange Star forces, to lead her new proteges into action in the defense of not only their nation, but also their world. Advance Wars is a turn-based strategy game where 2 commanding officers take the field of battle and fight against each other using raw military tactics to overcome the other. There are lots of things to consider when initiating combat with the enemy, from what types of units to use, where to use them, attacking formations, defending formations, terrain tactics, weather conditions, and heck, even what commanding officers you're using as well. There are a lot of things to consider here, and someone who isn't used to this genre might find some difficulty and develop some anxiety hearing all of this, but I assure you, I think the game does a pretty solid job of explaining how things work. Heck, when you first start the game, you can't even play the main campaign mode until you take on an extensive field training series of missions that goes over many of the game's most important mechanics. Heck, I'd almost recommend newcomers to the series to start here, just in the interest of not getting completely lost. It's a lot of tutorial missions, but trust me, you'll be wiser for doing so and won't be so mystified during the first mission of the campaign. Now, what will be the completion goal for this game? Well, beating the campaign mode seems like a real no-brainer here, but let's be real guys, we know I can beat the campaign mode. I did a Let's Play of this game back in 2010 for crying out loud, and more than that, in 2023, I played through both of Reboot Cam's campaigns on stream, which are basically just retellings and remakes of the first 2 Advance Wars games anyway. So, you've seen me do this extensively at this point. So, for this series, I decided to take it up a notch and play through this game's advanced campaign instead, which is basically this game's hard mode. It's pretty much playing through all the same missions, but with the AI having a greater advantage. You unlock this by just beating the normal campaign and buying the mode's activation for a single coin. And yep, I know what you're thinking.
You gotta be kidding me! 1 coin!
In addition to the game's difficulty getting harder, you also get a bigger payout from completing missions as well. Not important for anything in the story per se, but good if you want to unlock other features in this game. So if you learn the best strats for each mission, you can get a lot of coinage from just one advanced campaign playthrough, potentially up to 500 coins if you're on a roll. Wow, 500 coins? That's like 500 advanced campaigns in this economy. You're probably thinking though, how much harder is advanced campaign? Well, I'll be honest, it can get pretty difficult, and the odds may seem incredibly stacked against you for no logistical reason. I won't say exactly how, since this summary will probably showcase that in spades, but manipulating the game's AI will be key here. Let's just say if you're someone who grinded out S ranks in the normal campaign, you'll probably need strategies like that just to beat some of these missions regularly, and I'm not joking when I say that. However, I love this game, I have done it before, and I am looking forward to doing it all over again. So, let's get into it. Mission 1 puts us up against Olaf himself, the ruthless leader of Blue Moon. And who are we taking control of here? Why, Andy of the Orange Star Army, of course. Andy is your typical boy hero, stubborn in his own way, but he has good intentions, a heart of gold, and a brain of mashed potatoes. More on that later. Andy is a great starting CO for newcomers because he doesn't have any inherent advantages or weaknesses. All of his troops are incredibly well-rounded, and his CO power actually gives all of his units a 2 HP heal, which is pretty nice, not gonna lie. Because of this, Andy is actually on pretty equal footing with Olaf here, another CO with no default advantages or weaknesses, but his quirk is that his troops are more efficient whenever it's snowing, as his units won't be affected by movement penalties. Plus, I feel like his units also get a little defense too, so you probably don't want to be on the offensive whenever the white stuff is falling from the sky. And sure enough, Olaf's CO power just flat out makes it snow, so be careful with pushing when his meter is about to be maxed out. Otherwise, you may have a hard time getting away from his counterattack. Compared to the original campaign, this level isn't too much different. You'll use basically the same strategy of trying to kite Olaf's units closer to you without losing your heavy hitters. The big problem though is that Olaf has 3 medium tanks, and your best damage dealers are regular light tanks, and maybe the artilleries you have at your disposal. Actually, the artilleries came in pretty clutch now that I think about it, as they were a great way to weaken the medium tanks as they used other units as bait. It took a while to get this mission done, especially with Olaf using his blizzard move a couple of times, and as a result it took close to 20 turns to rout him here. But hey, this isn't about getting it done fast, we are just trying to complete this game here. When we got rated on our performance, we were surprised with a perfect power score and a perfect technique score, but a really bad speed score. And trust me, get used to seeing this, because not only is the speed score really hard to get, but actually I think there's a glitch in this mode where you will always get perfect technique and power by default, so no matter what, if you do the mission fast, you'll get the S rank regardless of how your troops perform. You could literally have your entire army massacred in the middle of the battlefield, and only a single infantry left capturing the enemy HQ, and as long as you did it fast, you'll still be considered an excellent commander. Which, hey, I guess that's not too bad. For mission number 2, Olaf puts his second in command on the field of battle in the form of Grit. Grit is a southern old boy who likes to partake in the hobbies of possum wrangling and corn shucking, and more than that, he's an excellent sniper as well. In fact, every single one of his indirect combat units are really strong, so his artilleries, rockets, missiles, and battleships are a thing to be feared. And not only are they stronger, but their range is actually better too, adding an additional attack square on top of it, meaning he can completely outrange an opponent's indirects easily. And if that wasn't scary enough, just wait until you see Snipe Attack, where he adds 2 more attack ranges to his units and can nearly insta-kill any unit halfway across the map. Yeah, Grit can be scary, especially if he gets a bunch of indirects out there. Thankfully, his direct combat units are weaker as a result, so you can power through them with ease. But if Grit has a chance to turtle, he will be one tough shell to crack with those defenses. This level is actually pretty good proof of that too. Grit starts with a massive army, and you're literally starting from scratch, so you have to find a way to build the right units to take down Grit's pre-deployed juggernauts, which consist of a couple of indirects and even a few medium tanks. Now, in the normal campaign, you can pretty easily wipe out the infantries on the north side of the river, but on the advanced campaign, Grit actually has a defense here, so you really have to work towards getting those extra funds, while his army will already be knocking on your door. I find mech spam to probably be the best course of action at a time like this. They're cheap units that can get a pretty good hit on a majority of the unit types here, assuming they're at full health, and they just add a bunch of targets for the enemy to get distracted by. Then, when the time is right and I have the funds to manage it, I buy an artillery or 2 for the medium tank threat, and then start building tanks once the initial wave thins out. This honestly works fine here because Grit actually doesn't have a base to build troops to start. So even though you lose a bunch in the process, you can always rebuild while he can't. So it just becomes a war of attrition more than anything. It's also probably a good idea to mention one of the biggest strategies to use in this game for AI manipulation: APC targeting. Let's just say enemies really hate APC units. And hey, I don't blame them. APCs can be annoying since they're not only infantry transport units, but also really beefy refueling and ammo restocking units as well. So an enemy wouldn't want you to use them for your benefits. However, the game kind of programs them as the ultimate evil for the enemies, meaning that no matter what, even if it's not wise to do so, enemies will completely go after APC units first as a priority. So if you need a medium tank or a bomber out of the way, or just to bring it closer to its funeral, consider using an APC to lure it in that direction. This was pretty much required in a number of normal campaign missions to get S rank. And honestly, like I said before, it's kind of vital just to clear some of these missions normally. So it doesn't hurt to start utilizing that strategy if you can find a purpose for it. Just saying. Anyway, after we finally overtake Grit's starting advantage, we deliver a beatdown with Andy again and complete this mission as well. It turns out that Grit actually has some ties to Orange Star, and Nell seems to have some history with him as well. Heck, even Olaf was apparently part of Orange Star at one point too, and Andy thought it was because he was Nell's papa for some reason. I don't know why he thought that, but hey, it's Andy. He actually didn't even know what his own CO power did, for crying out loud. So, go figure. Either way, it seems like no matter what, there are some lingering feelings going on with the Blue Moon COs, so we'll likely see them again. Mission number 3 gives us a bit of a diversion, as we are no longer up against Blue Moon forces, but a rogue group from Green Earth led by Eagle, the air specialist. Eagle is pretty threatening, at least when air units are about. His air units are not only more powerful than yours, but his CO power can be an absolute pain to deal with, as it essentially gives him and all of his non-infantry units a second turn of moving and attacking. Now, his units will be weaker on the second turn, including his following turn of defense, but if your defenses can't hold the line for more than one turn, then expect some very tough losses as a result. I tried my best not to get overwhelmed by him early here, but he just had way too many flying units, and when he took out my T-copter, my only means of transporting ground units to other locations, aside from just normal movement, that pretty much forced me to do this mission the long way. And yeah, that took a while, especially since he got the base in the top left corner, which he used to keep spawning medium tanks. Again, this mission isn't hard once you get rid of the initial air rush, since you have the resources to combat what's left, but just having that small transport force to capture the HQ whenever you're ready does make this mission a lot easier and faster, so do your best not to lose it. Mission number 4 puts us back up against Blue Moon again, but not before meeting another new CO, this time one of our own. Say hello to Max and his 2 friends, his muscles and his other muscles. Yeah, Max is a musclehead, but hey, he is probably one of the best COs in this game, in my own personal opinion. He's basically the polar opposite of Grit. Really strong direct attackers, but painfully weak indirect units. Heck, his indirects actually lose attack range, if you can believe that. Embarrassing. However, it's not all about a CO's weaknesses, it's how you use your knowledge to overcome those weaknesses, and make better use of your own strengths. After all, Max's attack power is insanely high, especially in this game. It's not uncommon to see a medium tank of his go up against another one, and come out of the exchange completely unscathed. And that's pretty much how you're going to win against your foes here, as once again, Olaf is back and being super smug about his medium tank and battleship units. Battleships are basically just indirect naval units, but still pretty powerful and tanky. Not tanky enough to deal with 2 submerged submarines of Max's, which can off one of the 4 behemoths in a single 2-hit attacking round, but still he has 4 and they can be a pain to deal with here. The idea of this mission is to actually use Max's main force as a diversion, while you send a lander with some capturing units to Olaf's HQ. The battleships actually make this difficult though, as they spend more time chasing my boat than acting as support for his land troops. So once again, I don't exactly do myself very proud with the speed requirement. In fact, the mission actually got kinda dicey near the end, when I realized that all of Olaf's medium tanks were still alive, just very damaged, and remember, the game only decided to give me 1 to start with, so I had to be very careful that I didn't lose my main force in this push of his. However, I lasted the long game again and completed another mission. Before I continue, I should probably also mention that we had a choice before mission number 4 started, where we could pick Andy or Max for that battle in particular. Now, choosing the character here actually determines more than what you would think it would, as it's actually not the same battlefield you'll fight on, and both the characters will get 2 specific and different maps, one more tailored to their unique advantages. And more than that, it'll lead the campaign mode down one of 2 distinct branching paths. I picked Max to show him off, of course, but in general, I prefer Max's route over Andy's in terms of the missions involved, and also what will happen later on in the campaign mode for choosing this route. Obviously, more on that later, just figured I would mention that quickly. Mission number 5 puts us back up against Grit, but this time it gets a little scary because of Fog of War. That's right, the dreaded strategy game mechanic of doom that adds vision obstruction to your list of concerns is here, and is probably one of my least favorite mechanics of this game. I get why it's a thing, because it does add a little bit of strategy and mind game potential to your maneuvers, but in a single player sense, especially in this game, it's absolute bullshit. Basically, no matter what, even if an enemy shouldn't be able to see you, they can, and will attack you if you're in their range, again, regardless of what their vision should be. The only way to counter this is that they at least won't see you if you hide in forests. They'll completely ignore that space unless they manage to put a unit next to it, and reveal you as a result. I mean, that's at least something, but still really annoying as an extra hindrance for you in single player. And once again, another very slow mission for me, because I lose a lot of my good units out of the gate, including my very helpful T-Copter, which could have carried one of my units to victory in a quick clear. However, Grit's ground troops also get eliminated pretty quickly as well, and by the end, although it's not much, I do have enough to finish the mission, assuming I don't run into any missile units hiding in forests. I think there was actually one in the north here, but since I kept my B-Copter in the south, I was able to scout out the nearby rockets to gun them down and make a path for my remaining capturing infantry to secure this win in my favor. Sorry, Grit old boy, looks like we're taking another victory from you. Mission number 6 is against Olaf, again, and this time it's a property battle where the winner is whoever reaches a certain number of properties first. I actually really like this one in the normal campaign, as it teaches you some good lessons in the values of choke pointing and spreading forces out to capture territory. Here though, oh boy, this was actually a real tough one in advanced campaign. You're not given time to dilly-dally here, as Olaf's forces will hit hard and quickly, and if they as so much as capture one of your inward properties, you're pretty much going to lose before you have a chance to attack. However, he also sends a pretty competent force of a tank, medium tank, artillery, and a rocket, and since you only have a medium tank, and APC, and a bunch of infantry units, you're really not equipped to deal with them in this state. And if he destroys your medium tank, you're probably not going to win this fight. So, you guessed it, we need to use our good friend Jonathan the APC to once again lure some of the attacking units to him, while we use our other units to weaken the aggressors. I had a good run going at one point, when all of a sudden, Olaf randomly decided to attack a mech unit in the south that I didn't know was in range. This seemed like a very stupid move on his behalf, but ended up being the biggest brain play he could have made, as that prevented me from capturing a property of his sooner, and when he decided to overload the northernmost base with infantry units, and I noticed he only needed one more property to win, there was literally nothing I could have done. I literally needed my infantry at full health to capture that other city. Nicely constructed plan there, Olaf. I gotta give you credit for that one. I tried my general strategy again, this time not putting the mech in danger, and also kinda just doing a better job in general, and I did manage to beat him this time. And hey, I actually got my very first S rank of the playthrough too. Although I was not happy it took so many attempts, I was at least content I got one during one of my favorite missions at the very least. Olaf turns tail and runs away, leaving Grit as our final obstacle in the Blue Moon lands. And this time, Max wants the satisfaction of taking him down himself, so we'll give him that luxury. Unfortunately, we are dealing with fog again though, and Grit is probably one of the more annoying foes to take down in it, since he basically hides the death machines that are his long-range units in the forests, which we can't see unless we have a unit adjacent to them. This mission takes a few attempts to get right too, just because I had to navigate around the map carefully to take down each indirect unit, being wary not to let any of my more powerful units get sniped in the process. I had one attempt that was going really well, but then Grit activated his snipe attack at literally the worst time, and I literally had nothing to work with afterwards. But hey, trial and error it is, and that's ultimately how you'll probably get through a lot of these missions on your first time anyway. My god though, fog really sucks, seriously. Not as much as it will suck in the next mission though, and honestly probably more missions coming up as well. But before we get to that point, we have some plot. It seems that Grit has history with not just Nell, but also with Max. I think it's pretty heavily implied that there is a love triangle going on between these three, and the reason Grit left Orange Star was to give Max a chance with her, because despite their direct versus indirect rivalry, they're actually really good friends that just had a girl they both really cared for come in between them. That's at least how it reads to me anyway. And for Grit, I guess he felt like it just made more sense for him to leave, since he's a bit of a loner anyway. I honestly wish they would have covered these connections and relationships a bit more in this series. It's very juicy stuff, I must say. Anyway, Grit promises not to get involved in any more disputes from now on, and pretty much lets us to continue the chase for Olaf. Also, at this point in the story, your third allied CO joins your party in the form of Sami. Sami is the infantry specialist of Orange Star, which means her infantry and mech units have a little more firepower at their disposal. It's not an amazing amount or anything, but you'd be surprised at what they can accomplish in a pinch. And her transport units like APCs, T-copters, and landers also have extra movement as well. The one major factor of her abilities, though, is the fact that her infantry can capture properties faster too, being able to take 15 HP of health away from a city instead of 10. And this means that a weakened unit of hers can still make up the difference if she's attacked during an assault, usually still being able to complete the capture the following turn if she has just enough HP remaining. While her abilities are good in their own way, I will say that I honestly prefer Andy and Max over her, but she still will get some use in this playthrough. Don't worry, just not right now. Back to mission number 8, this mission literally almost broke me on the advanced campaign. Remember Eagle, the flyboy we fought back in mission 3? Well, he's back, with fog no less. And worse than that, this is a pre-deployed map, so we can't even build anything to help with the super aggressive and annoying air units. Literally, we have only what we started with, and I wanted to use max so the indirects we get are even more useless. So not a lot of options here. I'm able to take out his first wave just fine, but I swear, Eagle has like a literal swarm of air units in this map, especially in the hard mode. And each time you think you got them all, out of nowhere, here comes 3 more to ruin your day. See, this is where the fog really starts to become annoying, because air units are so movement heavy, they can come from so far across the map to get you, which makes the fact that the CPU can always see your units at all times even more unfair, because one wrong move can seriously put you out of commission here. My recommendation for this one, unless you somehow know the S-rank strategy, something even I don't have memorized, is keep all your most powerful units in the forests, hidden from view, and try to keep your air units a little further back, just so they don't get sniped in the process. This is especially true of your fighter, since that may be your only recourse against the vast number of bombers Eagle has. March forward slowly, and take out units as they press forward towards your forces, making sure you're still in forest by the end of each turn. And if you need a unit to bait another one, make sure it's not one you could use later. Stuff like Max's artillery and missiles, for example, would probably make better fodder than his APC or anti-air, because the former can refuel and reload your units, and the latter could still retaliate against the enemy planes. Also, even when you think you have an opening to his HQ, don't get overzealous. He still has a bomber in the top right of the map, just waiting for you to make that play. And even worse, he has a medium tank on the HQ, so you'll need to defeat or at least drive that away as well. I didn't even see the tank until I finally got my fighter up there, and was suddenly confused on how I was even going to be able to do this. I did still have my medium tank with me, and even though I did get a good shot on it, Eagle's CO power quickly turned what should have been a victory for me into a very gross miscalculation on my part. And at this point, I only had a mech left to fight with, since my anti-air was stranded with no fuel left whatsoever. After too many retries of this mission, I didn't want to start over again, so I played the incredibly long game of trying to weaken the medium tank instead. It was a grueling process of needing to lure it to the right place and hoping that I could just chip a little bit of damage each time. And there were times where I couldn't even do damage to it either. Then, after getting attacked, I had to retreat back to my nearby city to heal it up again, and repeat the process until I could finally take it down. This took exactly 100 turns to complete in this fashion. Oh man, I said it before and I'll say it again. I really hate Fog of War. It just makes maps like this ridiculously unfair. Thank God for Boot Camp fixed that nuance, even if only a little, but still, doesn't make up for it that it's this bad here. Anyway, after the battle, we confront Eagle, and he not only apologizes for attacking us again, it seems like there's a bit of chemistry going on between Sami and him as well. My god, is this Advance Wars or the Love Connection? Seriously. Anyway, with him out of the way, we can finally leave Blue Moon, and we make our next destination, the Empire of Yellow Comets. Apparently Olaf went in this direction, but we have to be very careful, because the Imperial troops of this nation are definitely nothing to sneeze at. But of course, as expected, and because we need a reason to keep fighting in this game in the first place, the leader of the country, Emperor Kanbei, notices our presence and challenges us to a series of fights while we are moving through the region. And let me tell you, Kanbei is no joke. Kanbei is basically like Max. His units are more powerful than pretty much all the other COs, offensively and defensively. The only difference is, all of his units are like this, not just the direct attackers. And this discrepancy gets even more extreme during his CO power as well. So, what the hell is his weakness then? Well, funnily enough, his weakness won't actually come into play in the campaign mode, at least as an opponent, because even though Kanbei's units are much stronger, they actually cost a lot more to build, meaning on a smaller map with equal amounts of funds and properties, he may get outpaced by unit numbers. But since most of these will be pre-deployment scenarios, that's not really a thing he has to worry about here. However, despite being strong, Kanbei is a bit lax when it comes to general strategic ability, and I find that these maps do a great job in showing why. The first two maps kind of have the same strategy in play, where Kanbei rushes at you, trying to finish you off quickly, but if you make good use of choke points and you use your bases to heal up damage, you can kind of just let them all march to their doom. I even used Max in Mission 9, and even his indirect units were getting some good use just because his medium tanks held the defense really well. Then, once all the main threats got wiped out, he is pretty quick to rout afterwards. And then in Mission 10, Kanbei pretty much lets the same thing happen. He does try going at us before we have time to build up our forces, meaning he has a bunch of tanks, medium tanks, and even a couple of good long-range units too, while we have, like, nothing. Once again, however, using the strategic brilliance of choke points and recognizing AI patterns, mainly that medium tanks will always move after normal tank units for some reason, we can keep him at bay while an APC with a capturing infantry can move to the HQ on the other side, where Kanbei's presence is pretty much non-existent. Wow, really embarrassing, Emperor, seriously. Real talk though, I love this mission in the normal campaign, and I'm glad it was largely unchanged for hard mode as well. It really gives you a sense that any odds in this game can be overturned if you know how to use your units and resources well, and also helps that there isn't any fog to speak of whatsoever. I was a little peeved that I didn't get an S rank though, as I really felt like I did enough, but oh well, an A rank is still fine with me. The last mission dealing with Kanbei though, although I do normally like it in a normal campaign, was actually a bit of a different story here. See, the context of this mission is that Kanbei didn't have any bases in the previous two battles, so he finally acquires one here. Unfortunately for him though, he puts it on an island with no shoreline, so all of the units he builds from it are pretty much stuck there, and there's literally no reason for even dealing with it, so just capture all the other properties instead, since it's a capture battle, and just ignore his island of shame. However, for Advanced Campaign, they make this a fog of war battle for some reason. Yeah, I kinda have a feeling this will be a running theme for the rest of this playthrough, huh? And of course, Kanbei must have been taking some secret lessons from Eagle off screen, because this map is filled with enemy air units, just like mission number 8 was. And we're in a bit of a time crunch too, because this is a capture battle, and if you don't stop any of Kanbei's captures by turn 6, you'll automatically lose. I had no idea on how to approach this one at first, just because it seemed like I couldn't really advance any of my units, unless I wanted them to get wiped off by Kanbei's fleet. Especially since he had like 3 or 4 fighters in the area in the first place. I did look online for a bit of guidance on this one, just because I didn't want to deal with what I had to go through in mission number 8 again, and I did find a strategy that was pretty effective. If you turtle on your main island at first, you can actually lure all the aircrafts to you, and take out, or at the very least weaken, a good number of them, as you do have a fighter, missile, and anti-air units to start with. When it seems like the initial wave is pretty injured, you can start sneaking some transport copters filled with infantry and your B-copter to the other islands, and as long as you make it to the last captured infantry by turn 6, you can prevent Kanbei from closing out his victory, and start finally expanding your own forces. Yeah, this one was rough, not gonna lie. I appreciate the strategy required, but I really wish it didn't have Fog of War, as it just seemed like an extra unnecessary layer of tedium. This map is already difficult, having to deal with that many air units out of the gate so quickly, when you have so few units to begin with in general. And even though you have an airport to build more air units of your own, most of the good ones are really expensive, and you don't really have a lot of time to save up for them due to the time crunch. Also, since I mentioned airport, yeah, I can't forget about this piece of dialogue that happened in this mission. But look, this time we have an airport. What's an airport again? Ladies and gentlemen, one of Orange Star's top military commanders. Way to go, Andy. After Kanbei's defeated our hands, his daughter Sonja decides to step in and show her father what it means to be a military strategist. So, we'll be taking on her next. Now, the next 3 missions are technically optional. You have to beat Kanbei in 8 turns or less in Mission 9, 14 or less in Mission 10, and 16 or less in Mission 11 for these missions to even become accessible. And just for your information, those numbers are different in the normal campaign, so keep that in mind. Anyway, Sonja is an interesting CO. She's not very strong, but her skills lie in her general intelligence. Not only can she see further in fog than other COs, but she also has the ability to mask the amount of HP her own units have. So you're kind of in the dark with how much damage a unit is taken if you randomly run into one on the field, and that can be very annoying at times. Also, her CO power allows her to see even further through fog and through forest tiles without having to be next to one, so you can bet that's going to be a further pain in my ass. It's like, hey, let's take away the one saving grace fog has and make it completely irrelevant for 3 maps. Fan-freaking-tastic. Let's just get this over with. Funnily enough though, despite my reservations over what's to come, these next 3 missions actually went smoother than I thought they would go. I guess being prepared for the worst is a pretty damn good strategy, huh? Sonja pretty much decides to take a crack at all 3 Orange Star COs for these maps, so you have no choice in the matter for these battles, which does help limit the amount of strategy you need to develop, but I still wouldn't say these maps are free either, just because, again, fog. The battle with Max is generally pretty easy. Just try to keep your tanks in good healthy condition through Sonja's first wave, especially the medium tank, and try to keep them hidden in forests as well as you advance, just to reduce the chance they'll get sniped by various hidden artillery units. Also, be prepared for the area around her HQ. She does have a hidden medium tank that can catch you off guard if you aren't careful. Thankfully, I was pretty much locked into routing her forces here since all of my infantries got sacrificed early, so I had the mentality to at least check around these parts. The map with Sami is arguably the toughest of the 3, and hey, it's another property surplus battle too. The strategy for this one is to make good use of your initial invasion of the North Island and Southern Peninsula. It won't be super pretty, but as long as you get a hold of a property or 2, you'll at least be able to remain in the battle as you regroup and try to overpower Sonja's starting units. Also, make sure you damage the capturing infantry she'll use on the North Island to at least slow her advance, because if she gets more than one property there, you're pretty much out of the running. I think another thing that helped me here is that I was able to keep Sami's battleship alive and in the background during this battle, because it came in clutch in decreasing the tension in the south. Also, never be afraid to build APCs if you have some extra funds. Sometimes they will take the target off of the capturing infantry or your combat units, allowing you to focus on the main objective. Seriously, I was happy this one went so well. The battle with Andy ended up going the best though. I'm not sure what exactly it was, but it just seemed like no matter what play Sonja made, I was able to counteract it somehow. Air unit out of nowhere? That's okay. I can lure it over to my APC and have my missiles shoot it down on the next turn. Unit get damaged? That's fine. I'll just backpedal and heal it while my fresh units continue pushing and capturing, making my territory bigger in the process. This battle went incredibly smooth, and after how rough some of the previous fog maps went, this was a much appreciated breather for me. Also, she once again used the surprise hidden medium tank strat, so don't get too lax as you close in on the HQ. I almost did, but thankfully I was too far ahead in victory at that point. During our interactions with Sonja in between battles, we learned that her main goal in these disputes, in addition to giving her father a much needed lesson on strategy, was also to test us in our battle prowess as we prepare for a battle against a more dangerous foe lurking in the shadows. In fact, Sonja seems to know a little too much, also keeping tabs on the situation in Blue Moon, as Grit seems to be one of her informants as well. It kind of makes me wish we could see more of this, either through the main campaign or as potential side story campaigns, where you could use some of the other COs as well, and potentially fight battles from this mode but on the other side. That honestly could have been pretty interesting, I think. But at least that's a problem that's kind of remedied in the sequel. More on that later, of course. Oh, also, on a slightly related note about Sonja, we also learn that she's a bit mischievous as well. Maybe even a little... Wow, yeah, take it easy there, girl. They really play up this side of her in the remake, too, though. I mean, look at this portrait of her for crying out loud. Sinister. We now head over to Green Earth, and although we do have some experience battling the Air Ace, we've yet to take a dive into dealing with Green Earth's other combat expert, Drake, the naval commander. As you might expect, Drake's advantage is not at air, but rather at sea. But his day-to-day advantages are a little interesting. His naval units aren't necessarily stronger, at least offensively. It's more that they're just tankier and harder to take down. Plus, they gain an extra movement, which can be a little annoying if you're trying to outmaneuver them. Also, you are likely going to hate his CO power, as it pretty much is a global-wide HP reducing move that takes every unit of yours down 1 HP. It's not too much of a problem if you're playing as Andy, as his power can pretty much be used as an equalizer against it, but that won't really come into play here, as I will describe here in a minute. For me, Drake's just the kind of CO where I don't really like playing against him, but I'm not really crazy playing with him either, even on maps where he theoretically would have an advantage. I think it doesn't help that in general, naval combat is just kind of universally seen as the weakest aspect of this game, and the developers just never really found a great way to make it appealing. There aren't a lot of naval units, and they are already restricted pretty heavily to not just the water, but also to what they can attack in the first place, and the prices for producing these units is really hefty. You get way more value out of air units, which are not only more versatile, but also less expensive, which makes it a much better prospect overall. But yeah, it's a shame they never really got naval combat right in these games, as when Drake is compared to the other COs of this game, it pretty much makes him a fish out of, I don't know, some kind of liquid. Now, getting back to the missions for this arc, there are 4 Green Earth battles we have to play through, and you do get your choice of CO for each one of them. With that being said though, each CO's battle for each mission is actually different from the other 2. So you could have 3 completely different and unique experiences through the Green Earth saga if you play a different mission each time in 3 separate playthroughs. Which is kind of cool, I guess, although it does kind of suck that you essentially have to play the game 3 times if you want to experience every mission in the game. Your selections here, though, are still pretty important, as this could impact something much later on, so be aware of that as you move through this section of the game. I will be personally playing each of these missions with Sami, and, well, if you know this game, you know why I'm doing this, but more on that later, obviously. Hoo boy, where do I begin with Mission 15? I honestly thought at this point that nothing could top the difficulty of Mission 8, but here we are, and it's another surplus map, of course. I will give Green Earth one thing. They definitely excel in the art of having way many more troops hidden in the fog than they have every right to have, because that was definitely the theme of this mission. With Sami, you're starting on an island all by yourself, while Drake pretty much has a head start on the rest of the map. To win this, you pretty much need all the properties on either the top or bottom, plus one additional one on the other side. Trust me, the math checks out. Moving all your units to the other island is pretty much a 2-turn investment, so Drake will immediately start moving units northward to scout and destroy any invaders. And be warned, it'll only take like 3 or 4 turns before you start seeing some medium tanks, but thankfully there are a number of forests you can use to hide and catch them off guard when they get caught slipping. Believe it or not though, the land units aren't really the problem, it's the naval ones. And the fog too, but like, we already knew that was a problem. Drake has just too many naval units to start, including on the right side where he has 2 battleships. These battleships will assault anything you move on the main island, and if you get the bases in the center, good luck building anything, because that unit will quickly lose more than half of its health before it even gets to do any sort of attack. That is, if it even survives. This greatly reduced my capturing rate, which means my funds were never in great shape to build anything more than a tank, if I even was that lucky. You get some naval units of your own, but trust me, it's not enough, especially since you have 2 fronts to worry about, and only 4 units to contend with, something that nearly triples your starting amount. It's kinda bullshit, not gonna lie. The battleships are easily the worst part though, because with Sami it takes 3 hits to take them down with the submarine, and that's assuming they're done with full health units. And unless you can one-round them, Drake will likely send a cruiser or sub to retaliate right after, so you really need to analyze everything before making a single attack. I had a few attempts at this mission that went absolutely nowhere. So, like the 3rd Kanbei mission, I finally decided to seek some extra guidance to see if maybe there was something I was overlooking, and not really. This really was a bullshit scenario. The amount of very specific moves I had to make was ridiculous. Even needing to submerge and surface my subs at random points just to get his naval units to act in the right manner was absolutely asinine, and not something even a seasoned player would pick up on that easily. You see this little boat party up here? I literally had to put my units in this specific formation to make this work, putting my lander in danger of getting attacked by the battleship just so the cruiser couldn't get to my sub that was attacking the battleship. And ultimately, the battleship didn't even go down either, but this needed to happen to make the next plan work. I was getting confused after a while because there was still no progress really being made in the center front. I just kept buying APCs and the occasional medium tank to keep the infantries at bay. Also using my battleship that was miraculously still alive on the left side to get some other hits to slow their advance down. It's when I noticed that my lander, which conveniently had an infantry on board, was nearing the enemy HQ, and that reminded me of the fact that I was playing as Sami. Right, we're going the HQ capture route, that makes sense. And look, there are some convenient forests here too. Wow, maybe this will work after all. I put everything in the position, started capturing, and then... No! Come on! So, despite following the guide, or at least as well as I could, since sometimes randomness can be a factor with AI movements, damage rolls, and weather patterns, and yes, you do get random weather patterns in these Drake maps for some reason, this was a time when luck was not in my favor, and as a result, this attempt failed. Very, very unfortunate. I did try to salvage the run, since the only remaining battleship on the right was out of bullets, and I did manage to capture all the properties on my side, but Drake just had too many units coming forward, plus another battleship on the other side, and I just could not keep up with him. Eventually, I took the painful L and tried again. On my winning run, things were a bit shaky, but I was still on track to try the capture strat again. And even though it did get attacked while capturing, it had just enough HP to finish the capture and finally save me from this nightmare. Thank the Lord. Heck, we even got an S rank for this one, which, hey, not gonna complain about that. I deserve those extra coins for what I went through in this mission. That was just the first of 4 missions though, but thankfully mission 16 went a whole lot better. Honestly, kinda reminded me of how the Sonja missions went. I think it kinda helped that it was a pre-deployed map, so no matter what, I knew there was a limit to what Drake had in his possession, and I could advance whenever I was ready instead of needing to rush and throw all caution to the wind. I scrubbed the sea of his naval units, slowly approached his beaches from 2 different fronts, lured his combat force into my indirect fire, and then, when nothing else was left, sought out the rest of his numbers hiding in the forests. Honestly, it was really easy. pretty much night and day from the last mission. Mission number 17 is against Eagle again, and we might finally know what his beef is against us. You see, apparently something has happened in Green Earth before the events of the game, and although Eagle is convinced Andy is responsible, Drake doesn't think so, and has been using his fights against us to compare and analyze our actions. Eagle is starting to come around as well, and decides to use this as an opportunity as one last chance to see what we're actually made of. So we must duke it out once more, hopefully with less struggles than the last 2 times we fought Eagle. And honestly, that is actually the case here, believe it or not. Now, don't get me wrong, this map is still pretty bullshit, but on my first attempt, I was at least able to get intel on everything Eagle was going to throw at me. And even more so, I was able to figure out what units he had stocked near his HQ, so if I did try to make landfall, I could at least deflect his units and win via HQ capture. My first attempt was honestly going decently, even despite heavy losses, but it got to a point where I just couldn't defend against his offense, and I needed those units to at least distract the bombers at the end, so this was going to be a no-go no matter what. However, the second attempt went a lot better. I salvaged my fighters for the bombers by eliminating his fighter first, and snuck around while the rest of his army was busy. Honestly, probably the smoothest fight against Eagle so far in this playthrough. And it probably will stay that way too. After we win and after we bash Andy an extremely appropriate amount of times, Eagle apologizes for his aggressions and comes to the realization that Andy is not responsible for the actions that happened in Green Earth, as Orange Star would have been occupied with Blue Moon at the time anyway, and Andy is just not smart enough to pull off an invasion of that magnitude. I mean, there's a lot of stuff Andy doesn't know, as we've made clear. Sonja also arrives in Green Earth and explains to the COs that she and Grit have figured everything out, and is willing to show Eagle what's been going on, while Drake defends Green Earth in his stead. That's right, one more battle against the Sea Captain before we head out. Mission number 18 is really easy though. In fact, in Advanced Campaign you get an S rank no matter what you do here, because it's a defense mission. As long as your infantry survives, you win the battle, and really the only challenge is getting him out from being eliminated on the first turn, which you can easily do by putting other units in his path and use a T-copter to fly him out of dodge on turn 2. From that point forward, just turtle up and choke point the forces at the bridge, and hide your naval units in the reefs to reduce action from his sea units. When you get to turn 8, you're pretty much golden. Drake finally gives us the lowdown on what's been going on behind the scenes, and directs us to our next destination. We find out that apparently everything that has happened in this game is the result of a mysterious shadow villain from the nation of Black Hole. Apparently, this foe created a clone of Andy, who apparently went around invading parts of Green Earth, and that's why Eagle has been so hostile against us. Well, let's take out this clone then in our first map with a secondary force, as Eagle will be joining us in this battle. But this time on our side, thank God. We should be very familiar with Andy's abilities, so he shouldn't be too hard to take down, right? Well, in Advanced Campaign, I'll be real, you pretty much have to do HQ capture in this one. Not only is this a pre-deployment map, but Eagle's forces are absolutely laughable. He brings 5 planes. This badass sky expert, who gave us a hell of a time on 3 separate occasions, with literal swarms of air units, brings 5 planes in a battle where the enemy has not only way more than that, but several anti-air units as well. What the hell, Eagle? Thankfully, even despite this blunder, it's not a huge deal. Eagle generally gets rid of the bombers at least, and since you don't have any air units yourself, the enemy fighters are just kinda lost after Eagle gets eliminated. So just focus on luring the enemies away from their HQ, and send a surprise lander with infantry to capture the base and win. I will recommend resetting if Eagle doesn't destroy the cruiser though, just because it does make moving your sub around kind of a difficult chore, since you do need to eliminate his battleships as well. You can also use any CO for this mission too, and although I started with Sami since this was a capture mission, I did end up switching back to Max since he could destroy the battleships faster. It just made more sense to me. With the clone defeated, Eagle sends us off to black hole territory to finish this once and for all, while he stays back to fend off the remaining clone forces. I don't know, Eagle, after that last battle, are you sure you can handle it? Because I kinda have some serious doubts about that. Anyway, Mission 20 puts us up against the leader of Black Hole, the mysterious commander, General Sturm. Sturm is like a robot octopus thing from outer space. I don't know, but he does look kind of unsettling. As for his abilities, Sturm has a pretty big offense boost when attacking units, but also has a much lower defensive stat when getting attacked. So he'll do heavy damage, but also take heavy damage in return. So don't be afraid to push him if you know you can make some gains against his front lines. Also, his units don't take movement penalties from terrain costs, so he'll get the full movement every single time. Don't worry about his CO power though, at least not yet, since he doesn't activate it in this battle for some reason. Honestly, thank God. Now, I actually really like this mission in the normal campaign. I feel like it's a good work from the ground up map, and I think it can be fun figuring out the best way to take out Sturm's forces as both you and him advance. However, as you probably expected, the fog you see here is an advanced campaign edition, which does make this a little harder. Well, okay, I wouldn't even say harder, just more tedious, since you can't really see what's coming up. Really, it's not that much different, and if anything, you can kind of restrict Sturm's movement by hiding units in forests anyway, which is kind of nice, not gonna lie. Just make sure you're the first one to make it to the airport at the top, as whoever gets that will likely be the winner of this battle. Air units just come in so clutch in this game, especially if you're the only one who can build them. Sturm will build lots of anti-airs if you do capture the airport though, so keep that in mind. I ran into a whole slew of them when I was approaching his HQ, and remember, they're decent attackers against infantry, indirects, and sometimes even tanks too. I definitely got held up a few times in this one, but it was still a first try for me, because I had a much bigger advantage in property acquisition. Sometimes in Advance Wars, that's really all you need. Okay, mission number 21, the final battle against Sturm, as we try to kick him out of our lands. This mission is interesting because you get control of not only one force, but actually 3, and while the middle CO will always be Andy, the other 2 will basically be decided by actions you took throughout the game. For example, if you picked Max back in Mission 4, you will actually get Grit for this mission. But if you picked Andy, you'll actually have Max instead. And then if you picked Andy in that mission and unlocked a special bonus mission that's unique to that route, Olaf will be here instead of Max. Probably the worst choice for that side, so try to stick with either Grit or Max, which I got Grit for this one, personally. For the right CO, it can actually be between Sami, Drake, Kanbei, and Eagle. Sami is actually the default choice, but if you did all the Green Earth maps with Andy, Drake will be the CO instead. And if you did all the maps with Sami, Eagle will be the CO. Kanbei is interesting because I believe no matter what, you get him as long as you do the Sonja missions. But Eagle does take priority over Kanbei if you fulfill his condition, for reasons I'll explain later. Eagle and Kanbei are easily the best choices here, although I do think Eagle is slightly better since you can acquire air units on this route, and his stuff is just more financially stable. Drake would be good for his CO power, but since there is literally no way for him to use naval combat, really, what's the point? And Sami will just in general not be a good choice unless you just want to spam the field with mechs, all she would really be good for anyway. But yeah, obviously we got Eagle for this one, so I was pretty fine with this team. Now, 3 versus 1, this seems like a pretty good fight for us, right? Well, okay, Sturm does start with a lot of properties and a lot of pre-deployed units as well. No matter how you slice it, this will not be an easy fight. More than that, as I mentioned before, Sturm still has his CO power, which I still haven't talked about yet since it only comes into play here and not in the last battle. His CO power literally drops a freaking meteor on the field of battle, and any units in that meteor's area of effect will get damage down to 2 HP or less. This power sucks to be on the receiving end of. And the worst part is, it will always land on an area with the most expensive amount of your units. Thankfully though, that can also work to your benefit. If you spread out your most powerful units enough and keep a giant cluster of other decently expensive units together that aren't currently in the fight, you can actually bait the meteor into attacking that clump instead of your frontliners. And that's a strategy I will always stand by whenever I play this mission. Having just some control over a lethal ability like that is seriously key to victory here, believe me. So I'm not going to cover every single aspect of this battle, so I'll summarize my strategy as best as I can. I set up my forces in a way where I can bring Sturm's air units closer so I can get rid of them first. Having that amount of coverage early on could be a huge annoyance, and it was not one I wanted to deal with. Then I focus on getting rid of his anti-airs, because the more I can use Eagle's air units, the better, since a bomber of his can pretty much ruin one of Sturm's medium tanks easily. Plus, Eagle also starts with some medium tanks too, so it's not too hard to get some kind of leverage in the middle, while keeping your most powerful and vulnerable units still healthy. Meanwhile, I have Grit turtle back near his base by building a bunch of artillery. Artillery units aren't too expensive, but when you have a bunch gathered together in the Meteor's AoE, 6 artillery is basically 36,000 funds. Plus, I also had some other units I didn't really need anymore, like Grit's missiles, and that alone is another 12,000 on top of that. Grit staying out of the main fight and keeping his units together will give the Meteor a good target every single time, assuming I don't put my main fighting force too close together. And then, after Meteor strikes, I can join some units together and heal some of the other ones since I'm at his HQ, meaning by the time the Meteor falls again, it will just keep going after Grit and nobody else. Because Andy is the nearest opponent to Sturm, he will take a lot of heavy damage early on, so after a while I just start spamming mechs with Andy. Mechs are good because they're very cheap, do decent damage against infantry, regular tanks, and even anti-airs, and also can still capture, so they can keep pushing and damaging key units while he moves forward with Eagle. And then all the Flyboy has to do himself is just pick off any dangerous units nearby and make sure he stays out of range of any anti-airs or fighters that get built in the meantime. It's really that simple, and honestly doesn't feel that much more challenging than the normal campaign variation of this. It just has a slightly harder beginning, and that's really all there is to it. Once Sturm's front line starts to vanish, I admittedly get a little too greedy with pushing forward. I'm starting to move onto his side of the map and activate a meteor a bit too early, which causes one to drop on the front lines, damaging many of my most threatening units. While this is a shame, it doesn't really reverse the flow of battle, just slows me down a little and likely makes this take a bit longer in the process, more than likely destroying any possibility of an S-rank. However, since I have a lot of the properties on my land accounted for, lots of infantry starting to storm the cities and bases on Sturm's front, and even a few rockets of Grits heading in to snipe some fools, Sturm doesn't really have much to work with, and it's pretty obvious we're going to be victorious here. It's just a matter of when at this point. We finally defeat Sturm and end the conflict with Black Hole for good. At least in this game, anyway. We say goodbye to some friends, but before we completely head out, Eagle has one last request for us. He wants to challenge us, again, to another battle. So before we finish this game, we have one last bonus mission to do. In order to get this battle to trigger, you just have to have Eagle on your side in the last fight. Otherwise, the game will end here and the credits will roll. And while I could have done that to save time, and maybe just in general had some easier Green Earth missions, I wanted to go out swinging in this playthrough, so I decided to take on the challenge regardless of how difficult it would be. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the advanced campaign version of mission number 22, Rivals, easily the hardest mission of the entire game. This map is brutal. Eagle starts out with a tremendous advantage of units and properties, and you have practically nothing to work with. And yep, you guessed it, the game even decides to add fog as well, something that wasn't even in the normal version of Rivals. This will take a lot of practice and likely several attempts to research what types of units Eagle has and will build during his first few turns, and trying to basically form a strategy around defensive turtling, something we've definitely done a lot of in this playthrough so far. I'll say it now, I used a reference guide for this mission, just so I wouldn't throw myself on an endless meat grinder throughout what would have likely been many attempts at this mission. Also, it is probably also worth mentioning that this game does have a built-in battle save system, where you can essentially make a save state to return to if a move doesn't work out for you. You can only have one at a time though, so keep that in mind. I would have brought it up sooner if I used it more, but I'll be honest, I actually kind of forgot that it existed. I've always been just so used to grinding these battles out on my own volition until I ultimately succeeded, so it never really crossed my mind that it was available. I was definitely going to use it here though. On a map like this, with Fog of War no less, I did not want to take any chances. It's hard to really put the strategy into words too, just because so much of it can depend on RNG, with where Eagle even decides to send its units in the first place. And you will be going close to 20 turns, which means a lot of small variations can happen on each run-through. You ultimately need to weather the storm of his flying units at first, at least enough to get your own fighters on the field, and use those to take over the skies while also preparing for a wave of T-copters to take in a bunch of infantry for HQ capture duty. Meanwhile, you also need to make sure your own HQ doesn't get overrun in the meantime while putting this plan into motion. Making use of choke points is key here, especially considering I had a lone mech that basically held up the northern bridge for pretty much the entire battle. The tank in front of him wasn't weak enough to trigger his run back and heal mode, but it also didn't want to attack either since it would have gotten killed in the counterattack. As a result, I just had him sit there and not attack, stalling that front indefinitely, meaning I only had to worry about the air units in the southern front. So yeah, knowledge of small little manipulations like that can be absolutely key in taking the load off. Here's another one. Surround a fighter with non-air units on all four sides and it pretty much can't do anything but sit there and lose fuel. A perfect scenario for getting your T-copters ready. It took 19 days, but I ultimately was able to capture the HQ and achieve victory in this endeavor. And hey, the game even decided to reward me with an S rank, a perfect S rank no less. So hey, not too shabby for someone who took 100 days on Mission 8, huh? And yeah, sure, I did use a guide to help me get started, but you know what? By only turn 8, things were already playing out differently in my run versus the guides anyway. So I still had to adapt and make some calculated decisions myself, something that did ultimately pay off. I was actually able to hang on to my earlier gains for longer than the guide was, which means I could afford an extra unit or two for defense. On the flip side though, my HQ capture was definitely a bit sloppier, only having one T-copter and infantry to work with, as my others got sniped because of a few suboptimal calls I made. However, I still made it work, and Eagle was soundly defeated by Andy yet again. And after some friendly banter between the two COs, the credits start to roll, which means game complete. Okay, so that's it. That was the advanced campaign. And, well, okay. I'll admit, it was a bit harder than I remember, and trust me, I had done it before. I guess I just underestimated the amount of fog maps and the number of times you have to manipulate the AI into doing things to get a specific result on a specific map. And that's kind of on me, and not really the game itself for not remembering that. If you are a newcomer to the series, the normal campaign is more than fine, and a great way to learn the game, I think. It may still give you some trouble here and there if you're a rookie, but I think it does a good job of teaching you the mechanics and giving you a nice learn by doing approach. Not to mention, none of the maps are super long, with exception of Mission 21, so it's easy to start over and try again if a particular strategy doesn't go your way. Despite some rough spots, I enjoyed my time with this playthrough. Really the only missions I absolutely hated were missions 8, 15, the changes made to mission 11, and of course Rivals for, well, obvious reasons. But honestly, that's only because you were pretty much forced into doing one particular strategy for winning during those missions, and I prefer having more options available. I think the variety is where Advance Wars as a series kind of shines the most, and why I love it so much, where there's not only more than one path to victory, but your strategy can even change a little depending on what CO you use as well. I probably would have had a little more fun if I chose the normal campaign, but I probably would have also finished like 5 hours sooner as well, and I wanted to get my time's worth out of this one because it's a game and series I truly enjoy. The first Advance Wars game is far from perfect. There are definitely a lot of balancing issues, and the AI is pretty easy to manipulate, especially with the APC bias. Also, as mentioned before, I wish the focus on the campaign mode was more than just the Orange Star COs, because the other COs in the game have some fun abilities to take advantage of. Thankfully though, this problem does get addressed in the sequel games, and even if you wanted more from this game, you can always play the War Room maps, which basically allow you to play 20 different challenge stages with any CO you want. It's actually kind of a secondary campaign mode, you could say, without the story involved. I won't be doing it for this playthrough though, because it doesn't yield any credits, and I pretty much did all the War Rooms for my Advance Wars 1 Let's Play anyway, so you can watch them there if you really want to. And as far as the graphics and music in this game, I gotta say, Intelligent Systems did an amazing job with both of those. I love the soundtrack for these games so much, and I absolutely adore all the CO themes and general battle themes as well. That's why I played a good number of them multiple times in this video, because they're just so much fun to listen to. And I really love what Reboot Camp did with the additional CO power themes for each CO as well, basically giving each theme a unique flavor for it. It's really cool. And as far as the graphics are concerned, the game looks great, it's colorful, it's detailed, and it has a lot of personality too. I think Fire Emblem does a better job with animations, but still, they're pretty good in this game too, I gotta say. For enjoyability, I gave the Advance Wars Advance campaign a 4.5 out of 5. Now, there's a reason I made that distinction. Honestly and truthfully, as a gaming experience on the Game Boy Advance, this game would be a 5 out of 5 for me easily. But I feel like I had to do it based on this particular playthrough for this series. And unfortunately, I do think Advance Campaign does take a step too far with some of its difficulty design. Extra fog maps and adding way too many extra units in some levels was just more tiring than anything, and I just think there could have been better and more balanced ways to do so and add more difficulty. For difficulty, and this might seem a little strange, but I'm going with a 3.5 here. And remember, this is just for the Advanced campaign specifically. If I had done normal, I probably would have gone with a 2, but I feel like that would have been too low for the average newcomer, since turn-based war strategy games aren't usually so casual with their difficulty, and you sometimes have to learn a lot of the ropes throughout the game. But also keep in mind, I've played this game before on numerous occasions, so I kinda knew what to expect going into this game. I guess that's the difficulty of creating a game like this amongst a vast ocean of many other games I've never played before. I already love this game, so it doesn't have to win me over, and there's not much I have to learn either since I've done it a number of times. Heck, even for an audience too. Perhaps I should try a different grading system for games and scenarios like this, just to make that distinction a little more understandable for those coming into this series. If you have any suggestions, feel free to say so in the comments section, as I would love to hear them. But yeah, that's going to do it for Advance Wars. I really love my time playing this again, and I very much look forward to playing Advance Wars 2 Black Hole Rising for this challenge in the future. Not only is it more Advance Wars, but I do honestly believe and feel it's my favorite of the entire series, so it should be a good time even if I do the Advance campaign again. Also, I can't recommend this enough. If you want to play Advance Wars for yourself, definitely get Reboot Camp on the Nintendo Switch. It's a really solid remake and the definitive way to play Advance Wars 1 and 2. It's a shame the game had such a shaky release, and I really hope that doesn't discourage the developers from working on additional installments, And when I say additional installments, I mean new games. Seriously, it's been a long time since a new Advance Wars game. I know Wargroove exists, and it's kind of, loosely inspired by Advance Wars, but it just hasn't done the same for me as Advance Wars has. It's such a great series, and I really hope it continues. So yeah, let's end it there and take a look at the next game we'll be completing for this challenge.
Crazy Taxi!
Okay guys, thank you for watching this summary. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to leave a comment and or like on the video, as those will really help me in these videos out. And stay tuned for future summaries of this series. If you also want to watch full playthroughs of these games for this challenge, check out the video description for a full playlist of everything that's been uploaded and exported so far. And if you're curious about what I'm playing right now for the challenge, be sure to stop by my Twitch channel to see what my current progress is. Just be warned, I'll be a lot further ahead of where we are for these summaries, so keep that in mind. This has been SlimKirby in the GBA series, and I'll talk to you fine people next time. Later, folks.